Hello, I'm Joe Clark, and I've made this film especially for the P&O Orient Line reunion in Oxford in September 2009. I've used archive material of P&O liners that goes back to 1918 and up to 1962. There's a lot of new film never seen publicly before. Some of it is pre-war in black and white, particularly the film of Strathaird in Colombo, shown with her original 3 funnels, 2 of which were removed later. All the film of Canberra is from her very early days, so sit back now and let the memories just flood back. We watch Nalderra as she enters Colombo harbour. The film is in black and white and was recorded before the war. The thinking in the subcontinent at that time was the more funnels a ship had, the better the ship. The sentiment regarding 3 funnels obviously didn't apply to Mongolia. She's seen here on a Mediterranean cruise before the war, and as you see, the decks are crowded with sunbathing passengers. Going ashore was fun, using the motorboat and 2 lifeboats on either side. Standing room only, and the swimming pool was a makeshift affair using canvas and wood. Nevertheless, everybody seems very happy. We see Himalaya first, in King George V dock, before she sails, now past Stromboli. Passengers gather on deck in Aden to watch the comings and goings. You'll note the pith helmets, It's going to be very hot and dry ashore. These passengers are waiting for the tenders to take them back to the comforts of their ship. Maloya and her sister Multan survived the war and carried on until the early 1950s. I count myself very fortunate indeed to have seen Multan in Melbourne in 1952. Maloya arrives in Bombay. Passengers seen on the deck of Comorin awaiting their turn to go ashore in Port Said. And now we get a quick glimpse of the ship from the stern. Regrettably, these are the only pictures I have of Chitral, seen here in Tilbury Dock. You can see the stern of Himalaya in the background. I owe a lot of thanks to George Miskin for these pictures of Strathnaver leaving Melbourne. Some of you may have seen them before, but they're certainly worth including in this film made for the last Oxford reunion of the P&O on Orient Lines. With the streamers still flying, the ship prepares to cast off her ropes and make for the bay and then to the open seas. I am sure that most of you will remember Station Pier, Port Melbourne. Pushed and pulled by tugs, Strathnaver eases away from the pier. We see some rather cloudy pictures as Strathnaver moves under Sydney Harbour Bridge, and then we'll see her moving towards her berth in Pyrmont. It's the tug that's making all that smoke. Both Chris Daniels and George Miskin took film of Strathnaver from the foremast. These pictures are those taken by George. Film of Strathnaver de-storing in Tilbury prior to sailing for the Breakers' Yard, where we see her now. She was the first of two sisters, Strathnaver and Strathaird, built for the P&O and known as the White Sisters in the early 30s. They both survived the war and served P&O well until the early 1960s. We start with some rather grainy pictures of Carthage tied up in Hong Kong. She's seen here across the water from Strathaird. And still in Hong Kong, we come aboard where there's a party going on for some expats due to sail in her later that afternoon. As the party draws to a close, some of the visitors pose for photographs, handshakes all round, and it's time to go ashore. We can watch now as passengers line the decks, waiting for the ship to sail. Former guests and many other well-wishers wait ashore. You can see the blue band of a troop ship in the background. Excitement mounts as the ship moves slowly away from the quayside. And we'll get a good look at her as she pulls slowly away. Carthage is seen here passing another P&O ship at sea. Although I've been collecting films since the early 1980s to convert to VHS and DVD, I never had any film of Strathaird until very recently. This is the most remarkable film of Strathaird with her original 3 funnels in Colombo Harbour. The film was purchased at a car boot sale, and I have absolutely no idea who the person was who took these films originally. However, he must have had a very important job in Colombo itself and been connected with the harbour and shipping. As you watch, you'll see the comings and goings of passengers and also of the gangs that work the cargo, tugs, barges and even water hoys. The ship would stay in Colombo Harbour for a day, and there was always a lot of work to do to get the cargo on and off. As the ship would take at least another 8 days to get to Fremantle, she would need to be filled with water and any other essential stores. We get a lovely view of her stern here as the cameraman leaves the ship and heads for the jetty. We now have some colour film. Here Strathaird is in Hong Kong. You can see the Carthage in the background. I have Carola Ingle to thank for this film. She rescued it from Pixie, who lives in Australia. Although covered in verdigris, the films were found to be in excellent condition. You will no doubt have noticed that there is now only one funnel. Just what these two deck officers were looking at, we're about to find out. It seems that a flag has got caught up in the rigging and needs to be freed. Rather them than me. We now see the Kalashes working on deck. As with every ship of this type, the decks need to be hosed down every morning. Strathmore is seen here in Portside just after the war. This is almost certainly before her reconditioning. But let's now go on a cruise from Southampton. Staff are lined up on the wharf to assist the passengers with their baggage, and the family we'll be travelling with will be boarding in the tourist class section. Baggage made ready to be hoisted onto the ship, and it's not too long before the ship is ready to sail. We'll get a good look at her as she moves down Southampton water. She passes the Isle of Wight on her way out, and it's not long before the passengers are sitting out on deck, albeit wrapped up in their winter overcoats. And then, a day or two later, the crew prepare the accommodation ladders so the passengers can go ashore in Gibraltar. The blue ensign is hoisted, which denotes that the captain and a number of the ship's crew are RNR. Back at sea, some of the deck officers are inspecting the after steering gear. There's a very clear distinction between the first-class saloon passengers and those travelling tourist class. Despite this, the after section is very comfortable and there are plenty of things to keep the passengers occupied. And talking of being occupied, there's always plenty of work to be done on deck. As the decks are washed down, another port hoves in sight. We will now join the passengers as they go ashore in this southern Spanish port. You can see the Moorish influence in this part of the world. Back on board, the ensign is lowered as the ship clears the port. Now we can watch as some officers and seamen practice man overboard drill. The boat is lowered and enters the water with a big splash as the passengers watch on deck. And it's not too long before the boat is returning to the ship. Preparations are made to hoist the lifeboat back on board. Once inboard, the boat is firmly secured. There's an opportunity for the passengers to visit the bridge. After 14 enjoyable days, the cruise comes to an end and Strathmore moves to her berth in Southampton. The ropes are secured. It will soon be time to disembark. To my mind, Stratheden was the best looking of all the straths, excepting possibly Strathallan lost during the war. We see her here at sea. What follows now are a series of shots in Colombo Harbour, taken by a variety of people. This is a lovely picture of Stratheden and shows off her gracious lines beautifully. We move on to Aden, where Stratheden is seen at anchor from the Orontes, which was homeward bound on her last voyage. And finally a look at Stratheden, berthed in front of Orsova in Tilbury. Our first view of Canton is in black and white, shows her before the war in Port Said. We now watch as she passes another P&O liner at sea. The next set of pictures are taken in Aden. These pictures were taken by Richard Clack, who worked in the docks as an agent. Although not directly employed by the P&O, he has a great affinity for their ships, particularly those sailing into and out of Tilbury docks in the 50s and 60s. Here we see Himalaya in the Canaries. This film was shot by Michael Whittingham, cruising on Arcadia at that time. Himalaya is seen here standing off Cathay, transferring a sick seaman from one ship to the other. Another shot as Himalaya passes, spoilt a little by the sunlight, and that's where we leave her, disappearing into the distance. And now we have some completely new film of Chusan, a cruise from Southampton, Ajaccio, Naples, Villafranche and Cadiz. We watch as the passengers board Chusan. Very shortly their baggage will be hoisted on board. The ropes are let go and Chusan pulls slowly away from the Mayflower terminal in Southampton. An Alexander tug pulls her away from the wharf. We see her now as she moves down Southampton water towards the open sea and the Isle of Wight. Shortly after passing the Isle of Wight, she'll drop her pilot and the cruise can start in earnest. A few days later, the passengers are on their way ashore to Ajaccio. A lovely picture of Chusan, moored just outside the harbour. The day ashore complete, passengers make their way back to Chusan. When the ship docks in Naples, there's plenty of time to go to Capri by hydrofoil. and later on it's possible to visit Pompeii. And it seems in no time at all that we're in Villefranche. Here we see a train at Villefranche-sur-Mer. And then there's time to explore the town. That, of course, is what cruising is all about. Again, we see the ship's boats hard at work, transporting the passengers back and forth to Chusan, which is moored outside the harbour. We can now go up to the bridge and have a good look at what's going on the upper decks. In the chart room, the navigator is hard at work on his charts. Not knowing very much about these things, it looks a little bit like left hand down a bit to me. I'll just stick in the purser's office and take the money. Ashore again at our last port overseas in Cathay. We travel to Seville. And the sun goes down on our last day at sea as we return to Southampton. Whilst we wait for our turn to disembark, we can watch the luggage going ashore and just hope that our case will be waiting for us in the customs shed when it's our turn to go down the gangway. We now move on to Arcadia, one of the most popular ships in the P&O fleet at that time, popular with both passengers and crew. We see her first in Tilbury, and then at sea. And here she is, tied up in one of the Canary Islands. Passengers are coming back to the ship. You'll see behind her Himalaya. Another shot of Arcadia at sea. You'll see now Arcadia leaving Sydney Harbour. She's leaving Pyrmont and will go under the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and these pictures were taken by Richard Parker. As Arcadia passes underneath the bridge, you'll see Canberra berthed at Circular Quay. We pick her up on the other side, and these pictures were taken by Graham Woods. The last pictures we have of Arcadia were taken at sea. The first pictures we have of Iberia were taken in Tilbury Dock by George Miskin. We then have some pictures of her at sea. The next set of pictures were taken by Pixie, Carola Ingalls' friend. Iberia was seen here leaving Hong Kong. Another picture of Iberia at sea before we move on to some dock scenes in Southampton. Iberia is seen here leaving Ocean Terminal. And here she's at number 107 berth, the new docks in Southampton. Apart from her funnel, the one way to distinguish Iberia from Arcadia was the wraparound deck on A deck. Arcadia didn't quite make a wraparound. We can now move on to the two ships that P&O bought from the Belgians in 1961, Chitral and Cathay. Here we see Chitral berthed in a far eastern port. These pictures were taken by Richard Parker whilst he was on Cathay. As Cathay moves out, she passes very close to her sister, Chitral. On another occasion, the two ships pass each other again. Pictures of Cathay seem harder to get hold of. We can watch as she plunges through rough seas, pictures taken from the bridge. Moving away from the bridge, we see Cathay. She rolls from one side to the other and pitches and tosses in these very heavy seas. One can only imagine that the dining saloon was pretty empty for a day or two. Finally, we see Cathay tied up in Hong Kong. Although a much better looking ship than Oriana, Canberra's early life was not without its problems. They had to pour a whole lot of concrete into the bow to keep her steady. And then in 1963 she had quite a serious fire in the Mediterranean. It was quite possible that she might have been taken out of service, or at least moved to the Australian market in 1980, but the Falklands War stopped all that. The big white whale, as she became known, was very popular thereafter with cruise passengers, and it was Oriana that found her way to Sydney to take advantage of the booming Australian cruise trade. I have used footage of Canberra in her early days here, and haven't used any of the more recent pictures. Canberra was indeed a most gracious ship, and it was very sad to see her entering Southampton for the last time in September 1997. But we can leave her on a happy note as she passes us here at sea.